I'm now going to pass on to Jennifer to introduce her PhD student.
Hi, so I'm really pleased to be introducing the final speaker of this session, Taryn Hutchinson. So Taryn is in the third year of her PhD, which is kind of scary. It's gone by very quickly, despite the pandemic. So her PhD focuses on adolescent depression, honing in specifically on anhedonia, so trying to understand the role of mental imagery in anhedonia and how it can contribute towards its management. So I think without further ado, I'll let her tell you a bit more about the content of the PhD.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jennifer. So I'll just share my screen. So hi everybody, as Jennifer said, I'm Taryn, and I'll be talking to you today about the intervention that we've developed to target anhedonia in adolescents using positive future imagery. So what I'll be talking about today as a sort of brief overview is just a little bit of a background on adolescent depression and current treatments for depression. As I'm in my third year, I'll give you an update on the progress of my PhD, and then I wanted to spend the rest of my presentation really letting you know what this intervention involves, sort of session by session, what we do, the process we are in of delivering the intervention, and what our next steps are as well. So depression is a common mental health problem, which often begins in adolescence, and if untreated can lead to sort of more severe mental health outcomes in adulthood. But we know it's really can impact sort of education at the time, our social relationships as well. It's often characterized as extreme negative affect, so but things like feeling low in mood, tearfulness and guilt. I think that's something we often think about when we hear depression. But actually there's another key symptom of depression, which is anhedonia, which is the loss of pleasure and enjoyment of activities that are usually enjoyed. And we can characterize this as an absence of positive affect. And current treatments at the moment, they tend to focus on this idea of decreasing negative affects and making somebody less sad. But what we know is that making someone less sad isn't the same as increasing positive affects, so increasing positive emotions and increasing motivation and enjoyment in things. What we also know about current treatments is they are often involve talking therapies, so verbal techniques using words which focus on sort of the here and then, the now or the past, and fewer treatments focus on using mental imagery, which sort of a wordy description is representations of sensory information without external input. But what I like to describe mental imagery is kind of seeing with your mind's eye or holding an image within your mind. And we can have mental imagery for sort of past and the future. And why mental imagery is sort of really important is research shows that within depression, young people tend to have really vivid and intrusive memory, negative imagery around memories, and also in adolescence, research shows that young people with depression tend to have more vivid negative imagery of the future, and consistently within adults there's a sort of a lack of positive future imagery as well. So targeting mental imagery is important because it does have such a clear link with symptoms of depression, but also thinking about the skill of mental imagery versus kind of talking about things. Evidence again shows that our mental imagery is really closely linked to our emotions. So if I ask you to kind of read the word of your favorite food versus actually thinking about your favorite food and what that looks like and imagining it, we tend to get a stronger emotional reaction from imagining it and then reading about it. So just a bit of an update on my PhD so far. So I've been working on a narrative review to identify treatments that target increasing positive affects, so increasing positive emotions within depression, and focusing often a lot of these interventions contain lots of different skills. So trying to tease apart what the kind of mechanisms are and active ingredients in increasing positive emotions, and kind of using the literature to really guide kind of the intervention that we've developed. As a lot of people's research has been impacted by the COVID pandemic, because my project, which I'll go on to explain, is based in schools, we obviously, with all the lockdowns, were unable to get into school. So we were really fortunate to actually use that time, and Mental Health Research UK have been really supportive in allowing us to deviate slightly and actually conduct a survey, a longitudinal survey. So we had a survey with over 2,000 young people that took part in the end, and we asked them to fill it in sort of every 2 weeks for up to 8 weeks. And we had a variety of measures, but particularly around my PhD, we had symptom measures of both depression, so sort of low mood and anhedonia, and questions around mental imagery. And we're currently in the process of writing a paper about our kind of first set of findings around mental imagery and depression. And now with things starting to open up a little bit, we've been really fortunate to get into a school and start delivering the intervention, which is what I wanted to spend sort of the next part of the presentation talking to you about. So our intervention is called Imagine PA. The PA stands for positive affect, and it aims to target anhedonia and depression by increasing positive affect, these positive emotions. Imagine PA has been developed from Imagine, which is an intervention by my supervisors, Jennifer Lau and Victoria Pyle, which focuses on using mental imagery to target, and memories specifically to target treating depression, and using techniques such as memory specificity training and imagery rescripting for negative memories. And we've adapted that intervention to focus particularly on upregulating positive affect, which I'll explain again the techniques we use to do that. It's a school-based intervention, so we're targeting 16 to 19-year-olds. And a key kind of, I suppose, difference with Imagine is we've got a bit more kind of positive future imagery generation as a means of upregulating positive affect. So it's a 4-session intervention which we're delivering face-to-face. So in our first session, we really focus on memories and the ideas of how our memories can link to our thoughts, feelings, and behaviours. And we introduce the idea of positive imagery generation, asking them to imagine a memory, a positive memory that they've had, and seeing how that links to their sort of thoughts, feelings, and behaviours. In the second session, this is where we begin to focus on the future, particularly the near future, say something that they're looking forward to in the next 7 days. So the example I've given here is that maybe it's my birthday on the weekend. So we ask them to generate an image of something they're looking forward to in high levels of detail using all their different senses, sort of what they can see, smell, taste, touch. And what we notice during that imagery generation is that we might have things called dampening thoughts, which might interfere with how positive this image is. So for example, I might have the thought that nobody's going to come to my birthday party. We know as well that we can get quite self-critical thoughts, especially when we're thinking about the future, which can interfere with positive feelings and reduce our mood. So again, in this session, we really focus on introducing this idea of self-compassion and using imagery to do so. So I'm asking them to imagine somebody who's compassionate in their lives and what they might say if they knew what kind of self-critical thoughts they were having. In the third session, we again focus on positive future imagery, but for a more long-term goal. So for example, here, maybe getting their university degree. We get them to imagine what the ultimate goal is and imagine achieving that goal, and then think about the steps along the way to that goal and thinking about maybe what will be good about that journey, but also what might be tough about that journey. And lastly, in our fourth session, it's a summary session to think about the things that they've learned in the sessions, but we also focus on values. So family, friends, hobbies, education, employment might be some examples of values. And we think about how these values, what's important to us, link with memories, but also what we want to achieve in the future. And as I said, we kind of summarize the skills from the session and use that as a bit of a plan for the future and how to kind of continue practicing skills. We also have some homework tasks to help practice these skills, so around making memory specific and detailed, and also asking them to notice positive events that have happened each day and what that says about them, to kind of increase that evidence, really, especially around being self-compassionate, having evidence of positive things that you've done. So in terms of our progress so far, so we first of all delivered a presentation to a school of a sixth form of 420 young people, and we are in that presentation, it was a more general presentation on kind of well-being, but also about the study and kind of letting them know about if they were interested in taking part. From that, 21 students took part in our screen questionnaire using the mood and feelings questionnaire, and from that 15 were invited to an assessment session. 9 young people took part in that assessment session, and 7 young people met our eligibility criteria, and so far 7 young people have started the intervention as well. So in terms of what the next steps are, so we really hope to finish the case series shortly and publish what we find from the case series. But also the next steps, we had originally planned to do a randomized control trial to see the effectiveness of the intervention, but unfortunately with the pandemic and the timelines, we've had to adapt this somewhat. But it's quite exciting actually that what we've decided to do instead is a qualitative survey where we get a much more in-depth feedback from young people's experiences of the intervention. So we're particularly interested in sort of acceptability around the intervention. So what worked, what didn't work so well, things like feedback around it being in a school setting. And we recently attended the adolescent mental health advisory group to get feedback on whether they thought the types of questions we were asking were appropriate, and if they wanted us to, they thought actually we could be asking anything else. And a really key part of their feedback was actually about asking young people, did this intervention meet their expectations? So we hope to kind of implement their feedback for our topic guide moving forward. But thank you so much for listening today, and if you've got any questions, please feel free to ask now, or that's my email on the screen. But a big thank you to Mental Health Research as always for funding this research, and also to my supervisors Jennifer Lau and Victoria Powell, and also my colleague Laura Riddleston for her support during the project.
Brilliant, thank you, Taryn. Fantastic presentation.
Thank you.
I think the room will close automatically in about 3 minutes, so we've got time for a couple of quick questions, and I'm sorry for my poor timekeeping, but I'm sure somebody has got a question for Taryn. I'm gonna look on my screen. Peter.
Yeah, I feel bad that I've asked questions to all of them.
It's fine.
I'll just email this time. I won't bother to send. I was just going to say it's really interesting to hear about the positive imagery stuff, because we're doing some work of sort of a similar intervention really. So looking at positive imagery around previous memories as a way to generate positive effects. We've been looking at it more in the context of suicide prevention, but we've just started the end of last year. We've got a clinical trial running looking at that as an intervention for university students. But I just think it'd be good to get in touch at some point and find out more. You know, find out more about the intervention you guys are using, because it sounds like there's a lot of parallels. I'd be keen to find out more about it. So I'll fire you an email at some point, but that was it.
That'd be brilliant.
Fantastic. Any other questions? I was interested, I know we met last week and you did the practice presentation, you were going to go to your young people's group. I wondered whether you could tell us anything about how young people are feeding in, particularly into this final phase of the study around the focus groups, and what tips they gave you.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a great experience, and in terms of we actually did a positive future imagery generation, and getting their feedback again on that was really great to hear that they will engage with it. And in terms of the next steps around the qualitative study and the kind of questions for our topic guide, I think they were just really encouraged around thinking about, obviously we as researchers have interests and things that we want to know, so as I mentioned around acceptability, but also kind of what mechanisms are really working, or more broadly, where do they anticipate change, therapeutic change occurring. But kind of we wanted to know what young people are interested in and on what they think are important, and certainly around kind of, did it meet expectations of the therapy, did they sort of, what they, I suppose even how to ask what they find useful, and using their language as well was really, really helpful.
Brilliant, thank you. And I can see we've got a question from Emma and then Juliana.
Hi, that's really interesting, thank you. I just wondered what your experiences had been like with getting ethical approval for the project that you're doing.
Yeah, I think certainly having, because our project was adapted from Imagine, we had sort of some, or in terms of the background and kind of sort of justifications for doing the project, but also in terms of we also had to think sensibly because we were delivering this in a school, so around identifying risk and following risk protocols, particularly around safeguarding and things like that. That was quite a big I suppose not necessarily challenge, because I think especially because my colleague had delivered a similar project already, we had some ideas of how to manage this and how to go about this, but certainly in terms of when you're kind of doing any sort of mental health research within a school setting and thinking about how following what the school protocols are and ensuring you stick to that, that was probably the main thing that we had to really kind of focus on.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just curious because I also do a lot of research in schools and sometimes face a bit of a battle with ethics. So I was just wondering what's on.
Brilliant. That sounds like it was smoother than it might have been. Juliana.
Thank you. Taryn, I just wondered if you could tell us just a tiny bit more in terms of the type of schools that you're going into, or that kind of are involved in this, without names sort of thing.
Yeah, sure. So we've been pretty, I suppose, especially because it was quite challenging with the pandemic to engage with schools. We were pretty much taking an approach of kind of contacting as many schools as possible. So when I first started my PhD, contacting schools, particularly around the area that I was based in, because of kind of traveling and maximizing the amount of sessions we can deliver versus traveling across London to reach schools. The school we're working with at the moment have my supervisor Jennifer actually has worked with the school before, so they're quite familiar with kind of research and also kind of well-being within the school, and so I think like we have contacted lots of different schools and various schools. So at the moment we're kind of more based in sort of East London, but actually kind of we'd engaged with schools previously in Lewisham, and a period of time we tried to develop the intervention online and engage with a school in Manchester. So I suppose we've tried to contact a variety of different schools, and the biggest hurdle I guess is that a lot of the schools are really interested, but they're very busy, and trying to slot in a research project alongside everything else they have to do gets tricky sometimes. So it's kind of the school that has the kind of capacity to take us on that we tend to then work with.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't sorry if it's kind of come over, it wasn't a trick question, it's more just to kind of highlight your good work insofar as I think if people aren't doing that work in schools, it's really hard. And schools since the pandemic have been a sort of one-stop shop for dealing with so many different things actually, so and have really been chomping at the bits to kind of have anything that might support the well-being of their students. So I think it's more a reflection on you and your hard work to kind of get those numbers in. So yeah, brilliant, thank you for that feedback.
Brilliant. And I wondered, just building on that, what next? Will you try, or will the group try and do a bigger study on the basis of your findings? Are there plans for a stage 2?
That's a good question actually. So ultimately originally we had hoped, especially the kind of final part of my PhD would be around kind of doing that randomized control trial to kind of see the effectiveness of the intervention. I know my colleague Victoria Parr's got a fellowship to continue working with Imagine with young people and depression. So it'd certainly be interesting to see kind of where we could take it next and so forth.